Can you hear me? Can everyone hear me? I'm just checking sound. Now you can? Okay, sorry. Let's start over, just in case, because I couldn't hear that. So hi everyone, thank you for joining us today and welcome to our webinar presentation discussing salary and negotiation. If this is your first webinar, welcome, and I would like to quickly introduce myself. My name is Amanda Henty and I am the Alumni Professional Development Coordinator here at St. Louis University. I started my role in July of 2015, and since then I have been working on establishing and strengthening alumni professional development programming, and this webinar series is a part of that initiative. Our presentation today will be recorded and available for viewing probably later this week on our main SLU YouTube page. I will also be sending out an email to you that when it is available, it'll include a link to the presentation as well as the girls will share the presentation as well. So it'll be a link to the recording and the presentation itself. Throughout the presentation today, the chat feature will be available, so feel free to send your questions. Throughout the presentation, we'll have some designated time at the end to answer questions, but we might also stop at a couple points mid-presentation to answer anything that makes sense at that time. Also, we have we have myself and two presenters, so we're working with two sets of headphones. So if you hear some feedback, we apologize. We're just kind of short on some headphones today. Hopefully it will run smoothly though. If at any point during the presentation you experience some technical issues, I chatted the phone number to GoToWebinar's technical support, and they can usually help you pretty quickly to get that resolved. Okay, so now I would like to introduce our speakers today. We have Eliza Angarano and Cori Wagner, and both of our speakers are career counselors here at SLU. Welcome.
Good afternoon. My name is Eliza Angarano, and I am a career counselor here at St. Louis University. I've been with the university since the beginning of November 2018, and I work primarily with the College for Public Health and Social Justice. But really, we all kind of work on, similar similar things. So salary negotiation is definitely a presentation and knowledge that we're all very familiar with.
Hi, everybody. My name is Cori Wagner, and I have also been at SLU for just over a year, close to a year and a half, 2 weeks less than Eliza. So we've been here about the same amount of time. And my primary population has shifted a few times since I've been here. I've worked with business students, engineering, and arts and sciences. So I've kind of been all over the place when it comes to what this looks like in different industries. And we're gonna go back and forth today so you don't get bored with either one of us and switch slides every so often. So hopefully you can tell the difference in our voices and we won't introduce ourselves each time we switch. So I'm gonna give it back to Eliza to get started.
Great. So let's just first go over our agenda.
Or not. Okay, we appear to be frozen already. For those of you listening, we cannot get the PowerPoint to move forward, so we're working through some technical stuff. There we go.
All right.
Let's see if we can. Okay, cool. All right, Eliza.
Wonderful. So the agenda today will be to go over a few things. First, we're going to start off with what is negotiation, research on negotiation, identifying steps of salary and benefit negotiation, developing a budget and identifying a target salary, and then hopefully you'll take away feeling confident in your ability to negotiate. First up, what is negotiation? It is a meeting or series of meetings to reach a satisfying agreement for all parties. So really what we want with negotiation, when we say we're successful, is that it's a win-win scenario. So you as the employee, either starting a new job or gaining a promotion with your own company, you feel as though you're satisfied with your salary, with your benefits, et cetera. And your employer feels satisfaction as well. If one party, quote unquote, loses, then the agreement will not last. So maybe you go into a new job and it's just not exactly what you had hoped for, either with salary or with benefits. Most likely you're not going to stay in that position for very long. So that would be a loss. Negotiation is not asking for more money and then focusing on your needs or being confrontational. It's very much a negotiation.
Okay, so we're coming back to Cori. I'm gonna get this slide pulled up. Okay, so essentially, a salary in this context is you're thinking about it in terms of 4 different factors. So the first factor would be assessment of talent. So what is the job actually looking for? How do I meet or exceed the expectations of that particular role? Okay, we switched headphones. Hopefully you can hear me and not both of us echoing. Sorry. No, that's okay. Okay, so employer's budget is the second factor. So is that in line with what you're willing to accept? So that's a huge piece of this negotiation puzzle. The next piece, the market value. So we're going to talk a little bit today about researching sort of what that market value looks like. What are others paid in similar positions, and what are others paid that have similar experience? We'll also talk a little bit about location and how that can impact, as well as some other factors. And then that fourth piece is the ability to negotiate. So do I have adequate information, and do I have a plan? So Eliza talked about like going in with some sort of plan. Okay, I think, Amanda, we are ready to do the first poll. So Amanda's going to send out a poll asking about, your previous participation in salary or benefits negotiation and whether it's was successful. So you can take a minute and answer that. Okay, and we're working on some results. We're actually going to come back to those, but it looks like many of you have had successful negotiations, so that's great. Okay. Okay, so now we're going to look quickly at, I don't know if you can see my screen any longer. It says we need to close the poll. Okay, hopefully you can see my screen. Somebody let us know if you can't. I'm going to keep rolling. I'm going to talk away and we'll see what you can see. So we're going to look at a couple different charts just to show some data on who's more likely to negotiate and sort of their success rates. So there's lots of different ways you can look at this. This chart is specifically looking at business as the major area or the industry we looked at. So 29.2% were completely successful at entry level. So entry level candidates at negotiating. 50.5% were partially successful. So Eliza's going to talk a little bit about a little more about that and what that can look like, how it's not necessarily like a you win all or you get nothing. Like there's ways that you can kind of find some middle ground. And then 20.4% said we're unsuccessful. So it's some starting figures. And it won't let me do it again. Okay. Which one? We need magical Amanda again. She really is magical. I don't know how you keep doing that, but she's a magician, everyone. Amanda the magician. Okay, so next slide is looking at, this was a study, who doesn't try to negotiate. Eliza and I have spent a lot of time talking about this. And from this chart, it says that 66.2% of females did not negotiate at the entry level versus 51% of males. We could get into a whole nother webinar about that, but it's just interesting as we go forward, kind of number to keep in mind. Who gets anxious? So that's something else. I mean, obviously, it makes sense that these two stats would coincide. So 27.6% of entry-level males were anxious about negotiation and 42% of females. So females tend to be more anxious about it and then do it less than others.
Great. So now we're going to just take a quick look at what would happen, what kind of salary you would actually lose over time if you don't choose to ask or negotiate that extra amount. So we look at employee A. Their starting salary is $40,000. That first year with a 5% raise, it goes up to 42. Second year, 44.9, et cetera, all the way up through the fifth year. Then we look at employee B, and you see that they asked or were paid $45,000 starting out. And so then we're looking all the way up to the fifth year, and the difference in that is $8,253. And that's quite a bit when you think about that period of time. And you can see in red there for each year the difference and the amount lost just by that small amount. $5,000 a year, really in the grand scheme of things is not that much, but when we put it up to raises each year, it really does start to add up. Yeah. Sorry again, guys. We apologize, but we just keep on running into some technical difficulties. So poll number 1, results for that. Looks like we've got 43% of you said that yes, you had negotiated and you were successful. 18% of you said yes, you had negotiated, but you were unsuccessful. And then we've got 38% of you that said no, you had not negotiated at all. I think that's really interesting, and definitely something to look at and maybe examine as we go on. Some of those factors of maybe why you were unsuccessful, or validating yourself on why you were successful. Those of you that haven't negotiated or haven't tried, hopefully this will give you a little more confidence that you can going forward try these things out. So let's take a quick pause, just checking to see if we have any questions so far. Got a question, how do you know when it is time to negotiate? That's a really great question, and we're going to actually give you a little more detail on a little further on in the presentation about when to start that conversation. But we're also going to give you information on setting numbers for yourself so that you'll go in knowing whether, if you're given a range and that's not a range that's acceptable to you, then you're gonna have that thought of, hey, this is either not an opportunity for me, or I am going to need to negotiate. Another question? Okay, that's a good one. How much negotiation power do we have as new graduates? You know, that's kind of dependent on several factors, but I would say, depending on your experience, you know, did you have an internship? Did you have a job while you were, working on your coursework? Is your experience directly related to the job that you're applying for? Does your degree, or does your job, the opportunity that you're applying for, does that require a degree? Does it require a master's degree? Do you have that? What kinds of experiences have you had that are going to relate you to the position, to the job description, and even exceed those expectations? Sorry. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and thank you for those questions. We did get a few more, but we don't want to neglect anything else. So I'm going to turn it back over to Cori really quickly to move it on.
Okay, so back to Cori. So we did get a bunch of additional questions. We're going to see where they'll fit in content-wise in the rest of this, because I think we will cover some of this. What Eliza was talking about in that last question was a great lead-in to the next several slides, actually. So the things you want to think about, like the identifying the steps of this process, a lot has to do with the thought you put into it beforehand. So like she was saying, considering your worth. So we'll talk about that. Researching salaries, show you some resources you can use to do that, help you figure out how to determine your target salary, and then the actual negotiation phase. So there's kind of 4 steps, and we'll go through those. So the first step that she started talking about was considering your worth. So you do want to think about your qualifications, the skills you have, which may have come from specific internships or other jobs you've had, the unique background that you might have. So if you did an interesting combination of things while you were maybe a student at SLU, or if you've done some interesting things since you've been out. So if you've gone out in the community and done some things, that can be really impactful. And then any additional training that you might have, you can think about that as well. And then a lot of what your worth depends on is sort of what it would cost for you to live based on where you want to be. So needing to think about what it would cost to survive. We would like for you to thrive even. So not just that minimal amount, but enough to be able to enjoy your life too. But then you also have to consider that part of that budget does include benefit information. So taking that into account. And then the resources at the bottom of that page, the salary.com, Glassdoor, Paycheck City, and there's an additional one called ETC, I think, salary calculator. Those can be good resources to get started, and we're actually going to show you how to do that. So I'm going to pass it back to Eliza.
All right, great. So starting off, what we did was we got stuck on another slide. There we go. So what we did was we went into salary.com. Salary.com is a really wonderful resource when you're researching salaries. And you know, it may not have exactly the title that you're looking at, but it's going to come close, and you can try a lot of different factors to get a really good comparable salary. So first thing we did was we chose a title. So I chose Quality Management Director in the Healthcare Industry in St. Louis, Missouri. You'll see here that gives us sort of a bell curve as to what the lower end of that salary would be, what the higher 75% would be, and then the median salary. So median salary with no other factors is $134,071. So that's median pay in this area with no other determinants added in. So next slide, same title, same location, same industry, but what we did was we added our different determinants. So if you look towards the bottom there, you're going to see the salary is annual. The next box there, I chose that we had a master's degree as our education level or an MBA. Next there you see we have less than 1 year of experience directly with within our field. So that would be like a graduate just coming out of their graduate program possibly with no other experience except for what we've done in our master's program. Next, you see a 0 in the next box. That's 0 reports. So if we were in this this new position and we had no reports, what does that mean? Box next to that, reports to. We didn't fill that out, but there's all kinds of different possibilities here. So maybe you report to the CFO or the CEO. Oftentimes when we report to senior leadership, that's a little more of kind of considered more important in our work, that we're working with our top administration. So that can also add in different factors. Last box there is performance. This is a really good one if you are currently in a position or you've held a position and you maybe have had a couple of years experience at that particular company or within that particular job. And you can add what type of performance you've had. Was it good? Was it excellent? Hopefully it's not poor or very poor, but you can add those factors in as well. If you look back up at the graph, at the bell curve there, it gives us our projected salary. So we've got 117,499 up to 126,669. So that's a nice range, right? If we've done this research, this is a really good start for us to kind of move on and then determine our target salary. So next up is our target salary, determining that. So first step, we want to look at what the research says is the market value range. So that's what we did. By comparing our salaries with our title within salary.com, that was a nice range for us. So that's the market range for this job with our experience. Again, compare your experience with that range and determine a minimum acceptable salary. So as Cori mentioned before, that's bare minimum, but we don't want you just existing on ramen every night and not ever having, a vacation or doing something fun. So a minimum acceptable salary is a little different than what you can absolutely survive on. Minimum acceptable is acceptable to you at a minimum. So then we're going to set that as a base that we fairly deserve. I do want to point that out. Absolutely, we all want the top end of a salary, especially on that bell curve. We'd love to have that 150,000. However, we may not deserve that yet. Our experience may not dictate those things, and so that's why we want to put all those factors in to get, something that is fair to us and fair to our employer. So knowing your minimum salary, that's going to help you identify the lowest salary that you would be willing to accept in a negotiation. If we'd accept 126,000, that's going to be our bottom number. Okay, so it's very important to do this based on what you think you're worth for the job you're researching. And that's why we put those determinants in. That's why we take in different factors, because we want to make sure that we're representing, what we'd minimally accept, but what we also deserve. So next up, we're determining our target salary. So we start with a bolstering range, and that's going to start with the target salary. So it's the minimum amount that we would accept, which is 126 in this case, and it would stretch upwards for us. So you should not go too far upwards. So like 126 is a fine number, but our range shouldn't be 126 to 156. It needs to be a reasonable range, and that's about a 7% difference. So you would just add that as your range. So say 126 to 131. that's my bolstering range for this target salary. So now I have those numbers in my mind, and that's what I'm going to look for. I minimally will accept 126, but I'd love to go up to 131. Okay, so keep those targets in mind, and I'm going to turn it back over to Cori to talk a little bit about knowing some different values before we go in.
Thanks, Eliza. I'm gonna pause for 1 second. We had several questions. I want to address a few of them before we move forward. And some of these will be covered in some of the future slides, but I thought it might be helpful to get some of these, talk about some of them. So there were a few questions about sort of gaining the confidence to go in and make that case for yourself. Things like if you've been working for someone for a long time, how do you manage that conversation? When is it okay to go above that person? So I think a lot of that all comes, starting with the confidence building to that plays right into feeling comfortable going to someone that you've known well and you work well with. I think it goes back to what we've been talking about in that the more research you can do and the more you can make a case for yourself. So if you know what the market value should be, you know what special things you can bring to it, then you can go in and sort of use those calculator tools. And that way you'll feel more prepared to go into that conversation. And we will tell you, I mean, this is going to come up later. Not everyone is comfortable doing this. It's one of those, can be icky pieces of adulthood, but if you really think that you're worth it, so you just have to arm yourself with the information that you need to make your case. A couple others I thought we could touch on right now. Somebody asked, should a potential employer ask your current salary? They can, yeah, and they will sometimes. So that's not an unacceptable practice. They want to make sure that they kind of know what you're at. So I have seen that happen before. I guess I can't speak to the legality of that, but I have seen it happen. Let's see what else. We're going to talk about application and what you put for your salary in a later slide. I think that's a lot of them for right now. Yeah, so I'm going to keep rolling and you can keep submitting questions, but hopefully I covered a few of those. Okay, so before you go in, so this is sort of like bigger picture pieces. There are a few different things you want to think about in terms of your actual work and what that means to you. So there's sort of extrinsic values that you'd want to consider and how important those things are, and also intrinsic things that are more sort of internal, where extrinsic would be those outward facing type things. So things like salary obviously is important, vacation time, prestige, recognition, living in a big city, living abroad, some of those things are sort of those more outward facing, whereas other things are more important. And I know I can kind of speak for myself. To me, there are intrinsic values that are much more important. Like I will never make $1 million in my work. It's just not what I got into, and I knew that. To me, the intrinsic values are more important. So for me, being an expert and in my field is really important. So that's something that is important to me. Helping others, being creative, that can be really important for people. Working for a good cause, things like that. So you kind of have to figure out which of those are important before you can start thinking about the calculations and how much money you're worth. Okay, we had to have the wizard back. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about what can be negotiated. And I do want to touch on one other question. I think this might come into play. Somebody asked about finding comparable salaries for nonprofit work. And though this won't answer this question specifically, I do think it's important to mention not all companies can afford for you to negotiate with them on strictly salary. Nonprofits would fall in there, companies who are strapped for funding. So if you know that a company you're looking at working for has done a hiring freeze and they're just sort of getting that back up and rolling, it's really good to think about the other things you can negotiate that don't have anything to do with dollars. at least not directly. So things like start date or time off, vacation days, that's a huge one that you can work into if you're trying to negotiate with a company who's not rolling in cash at the moment. That can be a good sort of counter. Having staff to help you if you're sort of negotiating at those higher level positions, adding a person to your office can be something that you might want to ask for, including other things like, changing a pay increase or bonus schedule. Are they going to provide a cell phone? Even something like dependent care, childcare, that can be huge, and that can have a huge financial impact too. So make sure you're aware of all the different things that are on the table or that you could ask about. It can't hurt to ask in most cases, so make sure you're aware of all of those pieces.
All right, switching back to Eliza. So next slide here, to negotiate or not. So remember, when you're thinking about that, starting the process, it is about creating mutual value for yourself and for your employer. I would also stress that each negotiation is different. Do you have to negotiate? No, you don't. If you're happy with the offer, if you are comfortable with the benefits package, we do call it total rewards. So that does include your salary, your benefits, all of those great things that hopefully are contributing to your opportunity. So absolutely, you don't have to, but there are definitely times when you're going to need to or you want to, and that's perfectly acceptable to do as well. So let's start the negotiation process. So a few steps here. First off, you want to wait until you're offered the job and let the employer bring up salary. I know that kind of sounds silly, but we definitely all get excited about a new opportunity or even a promotion within our existing company, and we start thinking about salary. I would say I do it almost immediately. So you want to get yourself prepared for that, but you've already hopefully started, looking at and researching the different, through the different sites to get yourself a number that you're comfortable with that works for this position. So you want to wait for them to bring it up as long as possible. You also want to know your worth and be confident in your range. So we discussed that earlier. We're already going to do this research. We are going to have a range. We're ready to go. We're ready to go with that. Next thing would be to negotiate in person or over the phone. It's so much better to come to a negotiation in person or over the phone, because then we can portray our emotion. So we're excited for this opportunity. We're excited for this promotion. We're really looking forward to working with our team. And we just want to make this the best possible negotiation for everyone. And that's hard to convey via email. So if you're at all able to do that, definitely do in person or over the phone. After you get your offer, take at least 24 hours to reflect upon that. That's pretty standard, 24 hours. There's times when you could give them even longer. If you need a week, if you need 48 hours, that's fine too. But know that before an offer is given, so that you can do the courtesy to that company, say, that is a really great offer. I really appreciate this opportunity. May I have until tomorrow at 5 p.m. to let you know. And then you want to make sure that you have all that salary and benefit information. So the total rewards package here, that does include salary, but that's also your benefits, your vacation, your 401k, or whatever bonuses, things like that could be added in to this whole package for hiring. So you want to try and get all of that information before you make your decision, and before you come back and say, you know what, I'd actually like to have 3 more vacation days, et cetera, because then we're going in knowing fully what it is we want and what we need. Few tips. So I think I kind of touched on this a minute ago, but be positive. Go in with a positive attitude. Again, you're excited about this opportunity. You want to be flexible. when you start those conversations. So if salary is the top of your list and you really want to go in and you know you need more money, wonderful. But what else will you accept if that's not something that they're willing to do or that they can do? So think of all opportunities to allow yourself to be the most flexible that you can when you start those conversations. You also want to have your research and your notes. So you're ready to go when you come in. You have your target salary in mind, you've got your bolstering range, you've got reasons why you want 3 more vacation days or an extra $5,000 a year, etc. Then prepare your persuasive pitch. So why are you worth your bolstering range? All right, so if we want that $131,000, which man do I, then why do you want that? And why are you worth that amount? And listen carefully and attentively for how this can be a win-win. Again, you're going in, you might be a little nervous, but you're positive, you're willing to work this out. So what other things are they saying to you that can make this work for everybody? Avoid getting personal about why you need the money and the benefits. I will tell you, I have student loans. I think a lot of people do, but it's really not that employer's problem. So if we just say, oh, I need this, I have to pay for this, etc., that's not a good way of going in and being positive. You need to go in with why you deserve this extra amount or these extra days, etc. And then practice. Go ahead and, meet a friend or talk to a family member and give them your pitch on why you deserve what you deserve. If you want to work with a career counselor to do that, we would love that. We really enjoy working with our students and our alums that want to go over negotiation. And so we would absolutely love to help you practice that.
Okay. Am I back on?
Yeah.
Okay. We're gonna hold on this poll until the end just to make sure we get through all of our content. So we're gonna skip that slide, come back to it because I know people are curious about this particular piece. So we had a couple questions about when they ask for your salary on the application. We also had a fun fact come in from the crowd that at least in the state of Illinois, Governor Pritzker just signed a law prohibiting Illinois employers from asking job applicants their previous salary history. So thank you for whoever sent that in. So I had not heard that, but maybe that will be changing. But until that becomes more standard across the board, when you have to put it on the application, so there's going to be a few times you might have to list a salary expectation. They may call it a requirement. They may call it current or historical salary. So your first choice is always just what you want to stay as vague as possible. So your first choice might be something like negotiable, which not all people will like that answer, but at least that leaves it vague for you. A second choice, if they sort of indicate they want a number, giving a range that you're comfortable with would be great. And then a third choice might be, if you have room to write out sort of salary at upper mid range, or you could actually put in a figure that's at the upper mid range, dependent. Okay, so they can also ask you during the interview, which I will say I don't think I've ever had this come up, but I know it happens. I know Eliza has had this come up. So same golden rule here about staying vague. So you always want to make sure that you're not giving a number that's going to be lower than you want before you've done the research. So you could say, any of the following things that are on the screen. So could we postpone this discussion until I know more about the position? That would be fair. You're still learning about the requirements and what that job's going to look like. For the right position, I'm willing to be flexible in the beginning. You could say something like that. These are all very vague. And then even something like from our discussion, I know this position has been budgeted. What is the budgeted salary range? In some cases, I've also had, say you're in a screening process and you maybe talk to someone over the phone for half an hour, and then you do a follow-up call before they schedule like an in-person interview where that person may actually tell you, here's the range, are you still interested? So that's sometimes where that can come in to play. And if you're, so during the interview, again, if you're pressured to give an actual number, give a range. You don't have to give a dollar figure, give them a range that you're comfortable with. You can use Eliza's sort of bolstering range concept to spell that out for them. So between 45,000 and 55,000, if the assumptions I'm making about other factors, that leaves you wiggle room to come back. If you learn about something that you didn't know was a part of the job, you can go back in and say, well, I didn't know about this training piece, or I didn't know that I'd be supervising 3 people, or whatever the issue might be. And then the other one, based on the job as described and without considering any other benefits. Because at that point in an interview, you don't know what the benefits package is going to be. So you can't really make that assertion either way. So let's see. Okay, so at the end of the day, you're prepared for 3 different potential scenarios. First scenario is that the offer that they make you, the official offer, is below your minimum acceptable. And that's when you have to kind of come up with that game plan, decide if you're gonna, well, at that point you should be negotiating if it's below your minimum. Second might be if the offer is above your minimum but below your target. That's when you'd want to consider sort of all those extra pieces, the benefits pieces, the values, and see if it would be okay to take that offer. And then the third would be that it meets or exceeds your target, which sometimes does happen. You get offered more than you expected, and then you roll with that and you enjoy it and don't worry about negotiating. So.
I would say too that if you are offered something that meets or exceeds your target, that's awesome. You don't have to negotiate, but if you want to, you still can. I know a student who was offered well above what he had expected for his new role, and he still negotiated vacation. So absolutely you can do that. And just a reminder that everything is negotiable. So take a look at this list here. What kinds of things had you maybe not thought of that you could also negotiate? Vacation days are always big, as Cori said, but maybe a signing bonus or relocation expenses. Are they going to help you move to a new town? That would be wonderful. Tuition reimbursement if you do want to continue your education. Maybe it's a health club or profit sharing, stock options, etc. So everything is negotiable. Some additional considerations. So say you can't come to an agreement on something that you're really, really hoping for. These are some great what ifs. So what about promotional opportunities? How quickly can I move up through the ranks? Is this that kind of an organization where I would be promoted quickly if I can prove that I work hard and I'm doing all of the tasks that I'm given? What about my performance review? So when does that happen? Is that yearly? How does it happen? And could we possibly move that timeline up? So say if you're hired and you're not at that salary that you were really hoping for, instead of a year review, could you do it in the next 6 months? Is that a possibility? And then that kind of ties in for the next one for your performance and salary. So what kinds of review processes and raises or bonuses do they do? Is it performance based? Is it merit based? How quickly could we change the salary so that this would work for me? And then that progression timeline, that salary progression timeline, some companies do have, okay, you're evaluated yearly and it looks like a 3% increase for cost of living, or it's merit based and it could be up to 7%, which would be wonderful. But how does that timeline go? How do you know when you'd be able to renegotiate that? So finally, get that offer in writing. I can't tell you how many students and alums that I've met with that were really excited about an opportunity, and it was a verbal offer, and they then didn't get that. So maybe, you know, they were excited and they were told, hey, we'll be in contact with you soon to finalize the details. And then a week went by, and then 2 weeks went by and they followed up, and then the offer was gone. They gave it to someone else. So definitely make sure that you are getting that offer in writing. Usually what happens is they'll make you the offer maybe over the phone or maybe finalize some details via email, but they should send you a letter outlining everything that's included in your offer. So your salary, your vacation time, your other benefits, etc. Typically what they want you to do is they want you to sign that letter and then send it back to them or drop it off. But definitely make a copy for yourself and keep that for your records. That way you know and you're comfortable you know, getting that offer in and you know that it's there.
Okay. So we're almost to our last couple slides. I'm just going to go through some helpful sites for research. We talked about some of these. Some of them require logins and accounts and things like that, but I don't believe you have to pay for these, for any of them, for just like a basic account. You might have to, there might be a fee to get some sort of advanced features, but those can be really helpful to look at. And I think we're pretty much done. I think that I might put Eliza back on to see, there were a few other questions that came in. We might take additional questions. Might actually give it back to Amanda for that. But we wanted to thank you. We also wanted to let you know that you can schedule an appointment with Career Services to go over any of this and then any of the other many services that we offer. So the number on the screen is the number you could call, or you could email that email directly. For those of you who don't know, we are in a brand new space, newly renovated. The Grisa de Call cafeteria is now our Career Services suite. It's very fancy, very shiny and new, and we really like it. It's got great space for employers to come to campus and do interviews and things like that. And we also wanted to make sure all of you knew that we can do Skype and phone appointments remotely. A lot of alums don't even think that's an option. They think they have to come in. So just know that we can do any of those sort of virtual appointments. Do we have time to do the poll, Amanda? Should we do that last poll? I'm going to go back to the poll about how many of you have ever utilized Career Services as an alum of St. Louis University, not counting today. Cheers. How many of you have used us for other things in the past? And then we'll do some questions. We're watching the responses roll in. It's riveting. All right, I'm going to hand this back to Amanda, and she's going to moderate some questions. Actually, no, I'm going to give it to Eliza, and she's going to look at some questions and see if anything else rolls in. So I'm going to sign off, but I'm going to give you back to Eliza.
Okay, I'm back. We have some really great questions. Some of them are kind of specific. So if we don't get to yours, know that it's a good question, but it might be a really good opportunity for you to connect with your career counselor, one of us, and either do that appointment. You can typically email us, or we'd love to talk to you over the phone or via Skype, like Cori mentioned. So please know that we can always help with that if we don't get to your question today. So a really good one that I saw. What do you consider successful? Agreeing on the number you opened with, or coming to an agreement at a number somewhere in the middle that you're okay with? Honestly, I think that's up to you. It's really whatever you consider successful. You know, if you really want a number and it's impossible, like they just can't get to it, that makes things different. But if you're kind of going back and forth and you're okay with a number and you really want the position, that really is up to you. I know that, sometimes we may be a little more, I don't want to say desperate, but in need of a position. So that changes things, right? It doesn't necessarily mean that that's wrong. It just, what we'll sort of accept and what we'll work with are completely different. Let's see. Give some examples of reasoning for increased salaries. So again, that depends. If you have worked with a company for a while, I think a good approach would be to go forward with a list of your accomplishments. So just because we've attended work for 3 years doesn't mean that we deserve a raise. Sometimes we have to argue that. So what kinds of accomplishments did you have at your current job? We recommend you do kind of a running list so that you can add those things to your resume should you need a new resume to look for a different opportunity. So what kinds of things have you done? When we focus on describing our positions, when we focus on that on a resume, when we're writing a resume, we tell you, look at your accomplishments. So that can mean a lot of different things. Can you quantify those things? Do you work for a nonprofit and you wrote a grant and you guys got 10 new computers? Wonderful. That is a great accomplishment. Did you increase sales? Did you have 100% satisfaction with your customers? What did you do in your current position that set you apart? Did you start a new program, a new department? So really write those things down and pay attention to those projects because you're not always given the accolades that you deserve. So when you write those things down, it's a great way to go back to a supervisor and say, hey, this is what I've been doing all year. I know you remember because you were here, but this is why I specifically think that I need an increase in salary. I think that's the best thing to do to start. Yeah. Let's see. Sorry, I'm just kind of rolling through here. So this is a tricky one. How do you leverage knowing a peer has the same credentials and workload, but makes significantly more than you? Oh, that is really, really tough. And I don't know if I'll even answer the question correctly for you. But if, there's nothing that says, there's no law against your fellow employee telling you how much they make. It's actually wrong for an employer to say, hey, don't disclose what you make. That's kind of a no-no in the employment world. So even though we think of discussing salary as maybe like taboo, like we don't necessarily talk about that. I don't talk to Cori about how much she makes and vice versa. But if that comes up, and you see that, you say, Bob got hired after me and he makes more money than I do. Yeah, absolutely. That could be Bob's wonderful negotiation skills. It could be his education. It could be a lot of different factors. I think that that's still okay to explore. I would still go forward with the good things that I have done personally rather than being like, well, Bob makes more money than me. I really would say, here's what I've accomplished this year, Mrs. Supervisor. This is what I've done. These are my contributions, and I feel I deserve more than the standard 3% raise, and here's why. I think then you can broach that subject, differently. If it's not working, if they're not giving you the increase, but Bob's still getting an increase, I think that's a totally different thing. But that's the way that I would start. I would still start positively, and I would still start with what you have contributed to your organization and why you deserve those things. So I don't think, should I do any more, you guys? Okay. Yeah, I just want to be mindful of your time too, but I will say with the poll, it looks like 71% of you have not utilized your career services, and we would love to have you make an appointment with us. So that leaves 29% of you that responded that said, yes, you have. So wonderful. Just a reminder, we can help with all kinds of things. Resume writing, review, cover letters. We do mock interviews. My personal favorite are mock interviews. So if you send us the job description, then we can tailor questions directly to you. What's that? Industry shifts, career changes. What am I doing with my life? Negotiation problems, we can really try to work those things out with you as well. Once a Billiken, always a Billiken, so you have our services free for life. So please utilize that. Again, thank you so much. I'll turn it back over to Amanda.
Okay, so I think we're going to wrap up and be mindful of everyone's time here. Thank you for everyone who sent in questions. I apologize if we weren't able to get to all of them. Again, like Eliza and Cori said, feel free to call and make an appointment if you had some really more questions that you want answered. So thank you, and thank you for being patient with all the technical issues, technology in its finest. And thank you, Eliza. Thank you, Cori. We hope this was great information for you guys, and we hope you'll be able to attend some webinars in the future. Thank you, everyone. Have a great day.